Hello everybody, and welcome back to JOESTER Reviews, the show where we review things. And today, we have two victims, Moon Knight and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. And I feel like I should remind everyone that Multiverse of Madness was released in theaters on the same week as the Moon Knight season finale. So, that was a really good week to be a Marvel fan. But before we start, I should probably issue a great big spoiler warning, because there will be spoilers in this video. You have been warned. And so, since we've got two things to talk about today, I should probably stop beating around the bush and get into the reviewing. Let's start with... Okay, so you can't really get into talking about this show without bringing up the elephant in the room, or the hippopotamus in the room in this case.
Hi.
Oscar Isaac does such an insanely good job as Moon Knight. Seriously, this might be the single best performance in the entire MCU. I'm not even kidding. Playing one character well can be tough, but Oscar plays three, and they all feel distinctly different. Mark, Steven, and the little bits we see of Jake all feel like distinctly different characters. And what's especially impressive is that in some moments, he's like switching between them in like a single take, which basically means that like he transitions from being like Mark to Steven in like under a second, like without even like cutting away or anything. That takes some serious acting chops. And also, while we're on the topic of Oscar's acting, this is one of the rare instances where an American actor has been able to do like a good British accent. Seriously, if I hadn't known that Oscar wasn't British beforehand, then I would have just assumed he was a British actor who was just doing a really good American accent as Mark. We've seen plenty of instances of British actors playing Americans well, but not so much of the other way around. The only other instance I can think of an American actor pulling this off is Jonathan Groff as King George in Hamilton. And even then, the accent was like intentionally posh and cheesy. And that's fine if it like fits the style of the tone, but like this one was going for way more of a realistic approach, and I feel like it nailed it. And it's not even just the accent. He nails Steven's mannerisms in making him seem timid and out of the loop. Like, the rest of the cast, like Ethan Hawke and the girl who played Layla, were also pretty good, but not as important to mention, or at least not as like important to the quality of the show. I also really liked the action in this. There's some brutal moments there, and anytime that Moon Knight or Mr. Knight gets to kick the asses of a bunch of disposable goons, it's glorious. I also really enjoy relic hunting movies and shows, so episodes 3 and 4 were right up my alley. Hell, there aren't really any episodes that I don't like, which I believe is a first for the MCU Disney Plus shows. WandaVision has episode 9, Falcon and the Winter Soldier has episode 6, Loki has episode 3, What If has half the season, and Hawkeye has... Okay, this is a second for the MCU Disney Plus shows. Somehow Hawkeye was the most forgettable, while simultaneously being one of the better ones. Another thing that I appreciated about the show was the more mature tone. This is a new trend in the MCU that was started with Eternals, and has continued into this in Multiverse of Madness. Moon Knight has a lot of the humor and over-the-top moments you would expect from the MCU, but it still feels much more geared towards adults. And that's great. I love it when the MCU gets more experimental with a tone. Also, I quite liked how self-contained it was. Maybe Moon Knight will show up in a movie sometime. Maybe this show will get a second season. But everything wrapped up in a pretty satisfactory way, all things considered. So I wouldn't mind if we don't really ever get a follow-up. And that is a really impressive feat for a TV show. Usually at the end of the finale, I'm often left wanting, why did you end there? There's so much more you could have done. There are, a few things that did kind of bug me about the show, though. First off, and this is a pretty minor gripe, but since I went into this show knowing the basic premise and how, Moon Knight was connected to the Egyptian gods, I was positive that it was going to end up with one of them getting killed by Gore the God Butcher in a post-credit scene as a bit of a tease for Thor Love and Thunder. Now, I loved the end credit scene that we got, but considering how the next movie in the MCU is going to have like a god serial killer as the main villain, and this show is introducing a large cast of disposable Egyptian gods, it would have been perfect as a little tease for what's to come. I understand that it probably would have been too expensive to get Christian Bale to come out and film for like a couple of seconds for a TV show, but you wouldn't even have to show his face. You could just like shoot it from the back, just like show like some sort of cloaked figure just like stabbing one of the gods in the face, and that would have been perfect. Although I do understand this is a pretty minor gripe, and I kind of feel silly even complaining about it. I don't consider this a major problem by any stretch of the imagination, but it does feel like a pretty blatant missed opportunity. And now for the thing that actually pissed me off. The way that Moon Knight ultimately takes down Harrow is extremely anticlimactic. He just does a Jake Lockley blackout and then defeats him off screen. That's not satisfying, that's not good storytelling, and none of the characters even address this afterwards. Mark and Steven should probably be aware of the third personality because of that. So it feels like one of them probably should have mentioned that in the epilogue. So, overall, I enjoyed Moon Knight. Was it perfect? No, but nothing in life really is. So now, let's move on to... Okay, so this movie rocks. It probably has a lot more problems than Moon Knight did, but I personally enjoyed it a lot more. And before I start talking about anything specific, I feel like I should issue a second spoiler warning. Seriously, if you haven't seen the movie yet, then leave now, because we will be talking about major spoilers in 3, 2, 1. Okay, we should probably address the gym helper in the room. John Krasinski as Mr. Fantastic was great for like the 2 minutes he had. But I had this moment spoiled for me because of some tool who uploaded a low quality recording of the movie to YouTube as the audience reaction, with the reveal explicitly shown in the thumbnail and the title. Hey dumbass, don't do that! Although the moment was made significantly less exciting without the surprise aspect, I still thought it was really cool, and the rest of the Illuminati were fun as well. Professor X, Captain Marvel, and Captain Carter were basically confirmed by the TV spots, so the only member that actually surprised me with their presence was Black Bolt. And I gotta say, I kind of figured that after the complete disaster of a show that Inhumans was, that Marvel wouldn't touch that property again for like 10 years, but I was wrong. They even got the same actor from that show. I actually really liked his costume in this movie. I also loved just how short the length of time was in between his power being established and Wanda using it to kill him. And the scene where all the Illuminati are being brutally murdered was absolutely glorious. The worst death was probably Mr. Fantastic, but Black Bolt was a very close second. And that brings us to the other main thing that people have been complimenting about this movie, Sam Raimi's direction. They really let him go all out here. I'm honestly kind of surprised how this wasn't rated R, considering how gory and dark it could get at times. Raimi really brings his unique flair to it, and not even Spider-Man Raimi, like Evil Dead Raimi. From the horrific slaughter of the Illuminati, to the tentacle monster at the beginning getting his eye pierced out, to the fight with Sinister Strange with the music notes, to the final battle with Wanda and Strange re-walking into the alternate universe's version of himself's corpse, and it's so cool and so messed up at the same time. Another unavoidable aspect when talking about this movie is Scarlet Witch, the main villain. And I gotta say, I'm a little conflicted on this front. On one hand, Elizabeth Olsen knocks it out of the park with her performance, and you can really feel the terror in every scene she's in. On the other hand, I feel like this is a pretty big departure from the character established in WandaVision. Her motivation makes sense to a degree, but it feels like a pretty big leap between, oh, I created a fake family out of the grief of my husband dying without thinking about the consequences, to, hey, I'm gonna murder a whole bunch of people and try to kill a child. I guess when you bring the Darkhold into the equation and consider the effect it had on Strange and Wanda, then it kind of makes sense why she would act out of character, but the idea of, oh, this dark object turns the user evil is just so cliche and not a satisfying explanation for why she's suddenly evil now. I feel like it would have worked a little bit better if there was something else at play here, like if Wanda was being manipulated by an even greater villain like Nightmare or Dormammu or Shuma Gorath, or maybe even the villain could be an alternate universe version of Wanda who they have to recruit the 616 version to stop. There was just so many better options than what they ended up going with. My next complaint is quite a strange one. Get it? I'll show myself out. Anyway, let's talk about Stephen Strange himself. Benedict Cumberbatch does a good job, and his arc is pretty well executed. But Strange himself just feels weirdly ineffectual to the plot. Okay, let me explain. Strange's actions are extremely effectual. He is the main character, after all. But, the central conflict is centered around the beef between Wanda and America Chavez, with Strange just kind of being along for the ride. It feels like he's just a side character in his own movie. And the last big point I have to say about this movie is that for a title like Multiverse of Madness, we really only spend time in 3 universes. There were some weird and creative ways the multiverse gimmick was applied here, but they were mostly just confined to one single scene. And for a title like Multiverse of Madness, I expect more than just 3 universes. That doesn't seem like that high of a bar to cross. Although, please don't get the impression that I didn't like the film. It was a really fun watch, even if it did have some faults. There were a lot of little details that I thought were very clever, like how everybody is against Doctor Strange for giving the Time Stone to Thanos in Infinity War, and how the final battle comes down to exposing Wanda's heinous actions to her children, rather than trying to out-magic her or something like that. I feel like it would have been cool if America had taken her on a brief battle across multiple universes to get to that point, so we could have some even more creative universe stuff, but I'm okay with what happened. So those were my reviews of Moon Knight and Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. It has been a great year for the MCU so far. The She-Hulk trailer was just released the week I'm writing this, so it looks like the trend of more experimental MCU content is not slowing down, and I am all here for it. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, make sure to like and subscribe. Peace out.